Let us look at how this decision of federal government under Tinubu to reintroduce history into Nigerian schools have actually come to put the Fulani in their place. Because remember that before now, there was an attempt for someone to sponsor a bill which intended to make the Sultan of Sokoto a co-permanent chairman of Nigerian Council of Traditional Rulers. Whereas we understand that in Nigeria, some ethnic groups have existed 1000 BC, many years, thousands of years before even the Fulani came into Nigeria. And most of all this history was no longer being taught in schools. Hence, it is difficult for children of these days to know what transpired, how Nigeria came to be. But again, a quick check shows that actually the Fulanis came from Senegambia, of course, the present Senegal and Guinea. That is where they migrated from. I think this happened in sometime 13th to 15th century. And we understand that between 16th to 17th century, they settled in most part of the country, talking about the northern part of the country, places like Katsina, Sokoto, Kano, and some other places. But specifically, in 1804, Usman Dan Fodio launched the jihad war. And of course, he succeeded in capturing most northern states, but that did not extend to any part of the south. Understand that that conquest was interrupted and stopped in the Middle Belt area, but that led to the establishment of Sokoto Caliphate, as we have today, that controls all the traditional institutions in the north. But currently, if not for the idea of the federal government to reintroduce history into the schools, I don't think any modern child will have opportunity of knowing this, except for anyone that decides to dig deep by his or herself into the archive of history. But the major point is, let us even look at Ilorin, for instance. Because though currently the Ilorin is under Sokoto Caliphate, but we understand that Ilorin was purely a Yoruba town controlled by Oyo Empire. We understand that it was the Orani Kakanfo of Yoruba land that was in charge of Ilorin. Talking about Afonja, who at some point invited, of course, Janta Alimi, a Fulani warlord. But it happened that along the line, the Afonja was murdered, was disallowed, and the descendants of Janta Alimi successfully established Ilorin as an emirate under the Sokoto Caliphate, which eventually made them to take over Ilorin. And of course, we understand that currently, up to date, Ilorin is under the control of the Sokoto Emirate. That is when it comes to traditional ruler system of government. This happened in sometime 1820 to 1830 century. So you can clearly understand that the Fulani as a people were never part of this country or this part of the world ab initio. Of course, they are perhaps the last people that came into this space called Nigeria. Because then, there was not Nigeria anyway, but other major ethnicities like the normal Hausa, the normal Igbo, the normal Yoruba, even Kanuri, have existed thousands of years ago, like 1000 BC, before the actual Fulani started migrating into this part of the world. And currently, you have a situation where a senator will be making a bill and wanting to go and, of course, make the Sultan of Sokoto a co-permanent chairman of the Council of Traditional Rulers in the country. And for me, this is merely trying to achieve what an Usman Dan Fodio could not achieve during the jihad war. Because by implication, his intention was to conquer as much as he could conquer during that period. But it happened that his conquest was intercepted and truncated in the middle belt. Now, if you are looking at how to expand, and somebody will go into National Assembly to say, okay, I want to bring a bill, and you want to impose someone on other people, because for me, the Sultan of Sokoto never conquered any part of the southern part of the country. There was never a time any of the southeastern region, any of the communities in the southeastern region, any of the communities in the south region was under the command and control of Sultan of Sokoto. So you begin to question the rationale behind somebody waking up and just thinking in that direction that I want to sponsor a bill to establish this. That is why at times I begin to question the composition of people in the National Assembly in terms of the states, the number of states in the north, and the number of states in the southern part of the country. Because if the whole essence or the reason or how we created the states had anything to do with justice, fairness, and equity, if people came together to decide it, I don't think it will be possible that the north will be having 19 states as against of course, the 17 that is in the southern part of the country. So it means that such bill that is obnoxious, that is repugnant to the interests of some ethnic groups in the south, could even say through in the National Assembly if care is not taken, because of the undue advantage they have in the National Assembly. Because come to think of it, currently Kano is having 44 local governments, and Jigawa that is carved out of Kano is having 27 local governments. Put together, that is 71 local governments. And when this thing was created, it was not anything that was done through justice, equity, and fairness. It was done by the military, who took turn to rule the country under military rule, like people who were changing baton in the relay race. We understand that someone like Gowon, of course, started it at some point. Then we had the era of course, IBB, the one that caused the same Maradona. And we have the era of Abacha and co. So they took turn to create states. And in the creation of the states, the only thing that influenced their judgment is favoritism and, of course, impunity. And currently, every attempt to right the wrong has always been resisted. Even recently, all attempts of federal government to address injustice in the revenue sharing formula met a brick wall from the northern stakeholders. Because initially, ab initio, when the federal government came up with the issue of tax reform base, as part of the area they wanted to address was to ensure that areas that produce, areas that consume, get adequate compensation for their inputs. And that would have, in a way, encouraged other areas to start looking inward to start producing so that they can bring more to the table and even get more. But unfortunately, northern stakeholders rose vehemently, and all the area they felt was repugnant to their interests, they expunged it from the bill before they passed the bill which the president currently have assented to. And they couldn't have done this without their number in the National Assembly. And that number is what I'm questioning. That number is conferred on them by the military, who had opportunity of ruling the country under military rule. And again, if you look at the ground on the constitution, that even binds everybody together. That is why, personally, I've been advocating for a people's-oriented constitution. That's why I even encourage the president that he should do everything which is within his power to see how he can restructure this country. Because the constitution was imposed on everybody by the military. And if you go to the preamble of the constitution, it tells that we, the people of Nigeria, came together to write that constitution. I want to say that the highest level of fraudulence in that constitution. Because there was never a time in the history of Nigeria that Nigerians came together to draft that constitution. The only time I will say Nigerians had an opportunity to come together to address issues like that is perhaps during the 2014 confab. But unfortunately, the Jonathan government did not show enough willpower to address it or to see to implementation of the result of the confab. Though some stakeholders, some school of thought have come out to say Jonathan was merely playing politics. Some will tell you that the Jonathan government did not have enough time after the confab to implement the results. However I look at it, it was a better opportunity to address what is wrong in the constitution. Because for me, Nigeria can be negotiated. Well, in the first place, if you look at providence, God never created everybody in Nigeria as one. That's the reason, because naturally you have some unifying factors. Talking about language. Language is a natural unifying factor. God in his wisdom gave the Igbos their own distinct language, gave the Hausas their own distinct language, gave the Yorubas their own distinct language, and every other ethnic minority. However, it is not out of place for people of different languages, different ethnicity, different religion, different culture to come together under the same entity as a country. But it has to be through a unanimous agreement. Not what we have currently, that is everybody is under this entity by a mere coercive force of the federal government. If you remove the coercive force of the federal government, Nigeria is not in existence. And the Bible says, can two work together except they agree? Obviously, it's not possible. Because Nigeria is only made possible by the coercive power of the federal government. That is why, if Nigeria must work, people must sign onto the country willingly, not through compulsion, not through compulsion, not through coercion. Because if you want people to come together, the constitution must come from the people. Not somebody gathering people by will and picking people and placing them in a room and writing the constitution and saying that is the constitution that governs everybody. That is why it's difficult for people to agree together in Nigeria. And unfortunately, every attempt to address that imbalance is resisted by those who currently benefit from the greatest fraudulent status quo. And of course, I want to say that the northern part of the country is the greatest beneficiary of the current status quo. Because currently, they have 19 states as against the 17 in the south. You need to question why, how. And each time you want to address it, for instance, why will the Southeast be having 5 states as against 6 states in other geographical zones? And each time you rise, you want to address it, the northern stakeholders will always advise you, go through the National Assembly. Because they know that they already have the numbers in the National Assembly, and once an interest is repugnant to their interest, they will always use their numbers in the National Assembly to kill it. That's why personally I'm even saying the North Central or the Middle Belt, as they want to be called currently, should even gear up and be ready to contest and govern this country. Can decide that over the years, the Connaughts, or particularly the Fulanis, has always used them to get the number. Well, I don't think anybody from the Middle Belt have actually governed the country, talking about since the inception of the national democracy, or even under the military rule. So I want to believe that the North Central should be willing to gear up to challenge anyone that want to govern, that yes, they too can govern. Because it is not just only when they not want to make up the number, they remember that they have the Middle Belt. But once they get the number, they collect the position and give them peanuts. So they too should be ready to have their own fair share of Nigeria in terms of leadership, just as the southeastern part of the country should equally be given their own fair share of leadership. We understand that since this Nigerian democracy in 1999 up to date, the Igbos, or better called the Eastern region, have not had the opportunity of governing Nigeria. And if you come to the southern part of the country, understand that the South have actually governed for 6 years. That was under former President Goodluck Jonathan. The Southwest have actually governed the past as well, talking about the era of former President Olusegun Obasanjo. And currently, the man Tinubu is in the saddle. So that leaves us with the Southeast that have not governed at all in the southern part of the country. So even if we are looking at the tacit agreement that talks about if one region govern, another region should govern, I think if you go deeper into that microzoning, Southeast is more favored, most favored to govern Nigeria anytime it is the southern turn. But as you have it, the Southwesterner is still in the saddle. Though there is no constitutional provision that says a particular region will govern at a particular time. But if we must look into the tacit agreement that makes the South to claim that it is their turn, so that tacit agreement more recognize that the Southeast have not governed and that they should be given the opportunity to govern. But I must say very big thank you for your time. This is Entitlement.